Greetings and welcome everyone to Alra TV's new show, Harry Speaks. I'm your host, Harry, and today we have a topic on emotional blockages. Now, if emotions are not carefully managed or they've not managed it correctly, they could affect our learning, motivation, or behavior, and even to an extent where we could have communication issues with other human beings. Now, today, to discuss this further on emotional blockages, I have a very special friend named Noaman Rahin, and he is also known by his artist name Soulflow. And he's a very talented young man. He's an actor, a poet, a rapper, and also a content creator from Toronto in Canada. So I'm welcoming my guest, Mr. Soulflow. It's a pleasure to have you here today, and I hope you're doing good today. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Harry. I really appreciate you bringing me on. And yeah, I'm doing great.
So you told me when we were chatting up before, we had a little dialogue, and you said you use your art and mindfulness as a catalyst for self-discovery. Now, we have this topic on emotional blockages. Now, can you tell me a bit more and the audience more about yourself, and how did you actually come to this across this knowledge of when you realize that every human has a built-in emotional blockage, and it can be very unpleasant to deal with, and how this led to discovering your true purpose in life?
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of give a little background, I started out, going with university and the traditional path of I was studying IT in university. And for me, it wasn't something that I actually wanted to do. So I realized that what I wanted to do was a little bit more creative and be more, more in touch with myself. So I let go of that, and I got into acting. And around the same time, I was interested in, um, I guess you could say, searching for truth. And I studied a lot of different books, religious books and theologies and philosophies. And it was around that time that I also got into acting. And what acting really taught me was a lot about myself, because what I realized is there's a lot of things that we can study that are outside of ourselves, like, books and different theories and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's you that you have to kind of, I guess you could say, put up with. You have to put up with yourself, and you have to deal with this everyday situation that we call life. Every day you have to wake up and deal with conflict and deal with your emotions. So I realized at the end of the day, the most effective thing that we can do is learn about ourselves and educate ourselves about your emotions and your mind and how it works and how to deal with that on a regular day-to-day basis. And for me, acting was really what kind of helped me do that and complemented my search for self-discovery. And it really taught me that a lot of people have emotional blockages, and you don't notice it unless you're in a situation that forces you to bring out a certain or express a certain emotion, and then you kind of feel like, a little restricted, and then you realize, there's something here that is unresolved trauma or something like that. And that's what acting really kind of brought out for me and helped me kind of see that.
Right. So you mentioned that acting helped along helped you along this journey to actually see two sides of yourself and to see the hidden aspect of yourself, where you had the buried, unresolved matters and issues from years. It could be from childhood, from school days, and it could be just parental issues. And now, when you were acting and you were playing out roles and characters of different themes, now you began to realize these. Now, you did recognize that these were there. The emotional blockages could be of anger, could be of fear, could be of neglection. Now, let me ask you one thing here. Now, you have discovered this. Now, how would you say, how does one individual, how does one person actually develop these blockages? And what happens? Is there some sort of a trauma, or is something happens that leads a person to come across this, and there's a blockage of emotions that is built inside?
Yeah. So I think every single person on some level experiences emotional blockages, because it has to do with your childhood, right? As you grow up, you no matter how good your parents were, and no matter how encouraging they were for you to express, it's nobody is perfect, right? Everyone has a certain set of conditioning, and a certain culture, and certain biases that they grow up with, and with those come along emotional blockages. It's not avoidable. So I think what happens is it's our responsibility as an individual to kind of look at yourself and say, okay, let me see what aspects of myself I'm not expressing. And that's easier said than done, actually, because like I mentioned, it's a lot of times these things are subconscious, so we're not really aware of them until we come into a situation where we feel that like restrictiveness, and we feel kind of limited within ourselves, where we're not expressing something, or something is being held back, right? And I think each person goes through it, and it has to do with the fact that our minds work in a way where if we experience something negative, we don't want to experience that negative experience again.
Right.
Obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to kind of avoid that, and we do that by putting off subconsciously those things that we don't want to experience again. And that could be trauma, it could be shame, it could be guilt, whatever it is, we want to avoid that. So that's we protect ourselves by avoiding that feeling and that experience again. So we just rather just stay safe, right?
Right. And now the problem is, which I have, is, I see this a lot, which is now emotions are such a thing. They can't be touched, seen. You can't hear them. They really are something which are hidden behind these curtains of flesh and mind, and it's very internally. It's all chemical reaction. And now the problem is, when you have a physical illness, right? Okay, if I have a flu, then I would, I would be sneezing, I would have a blocked nose, and I would have other symptoms. Now, the problem with emotion blockages, you can't really tell, like, if this person is full of fear and it's always been there since a young age, or if he is guilty. And with emotional blockages, how would you say, what are the symptoms a person can begin to highlight that, okay, this is what it is? Because for an actor, it's after years of practice where you actually get to see two different sides of yourself. But as a normal person, as a human being, what would you say that how could we really highlight and see for ourselves the symptoms of our emotion blockages?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Because as I mentioned, emotional blockages are usually subconscious, which means we're not entirely aware that they even exist, right? So that's a great question. And a lot of the times, I think you become aware of things as you bring the unconscious into your conscious. So it's something that you have to personally work on. And I think you notice it. Everyone notices it in different situations because everyone's, experiences in life were different.
Mm-hmm.
So as an example, for me, one thing that I noticed within myself years ago was something to do with anxiety. Because me and my friends, we would freestyle together. So we'd play a beat, and we'd rap and freestyle, and just have fun. And I noticed that when it was my turn, we'd kind of sit in a circle. And when it was my turn, I was kind of anxious, and I was like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't know
Yes.
how to do this?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so that's when, and in the beginning, I didn't even like recognize this is a feeling of anxiety. This is me kind of limiting my expression in a way, right? So it's something that when it pops up, you'd rather look away from it and say, oh yeah, anyways, so what can we, you don't want to look at it.
Yeah.
If you look at it, you have to face something negative about yourself, or something you're not expressing, which people don't like to do, right? We don't like to look at the ugly sides of ourselves, or the fear of ourselves. So there's going to be different situations for each person. So there's no like formula for how do you notice it, but I think you just have to be self-aware enough where you're paying attention to times where you feel restricted or kind of tight, and that feeling is usually accompanied by like some sort of fear or insecurity from past emotions.
Would you say having a bird's eye view would help? So you as an individual, because I do this oftentimes, is when I'm, I have a lot of mood swings. It's just something within I'm actually have. But it is what happens if I'm overthinking, or if I'm under some sort of a fear. I take myself out of that, myself. I said, no, Harry needs to come out. So I look at myself as a bird view, and I see myself as in a small, like a game, and I see myself going around the mazes, and see myself like from a different above, and I realize that what I'm trying to think, or what I'm trying to focus myself on isn't too important, or isn't too great in reality. So what would you say about practicing this thing when you begin to look from above and not be that detaching ourselves?
Okay, yeah, yeah. Because what happens is when we, like I said, when we're experiencing something like that, you want to pull yourself away from that situation because you don't want to experience that fear or that insecurity or whatever it is. You don't want to face it, or at least most of the times you don't want to face it. And when it comes up, that's why we distract ourselves and we look away. In a sense, in our mind, it's like we're looking away. And I guess you could say this, use the same analogy of like you're out of your body in a sense, and you're somewhere else, right? Whatever mental state you want to call that. You're not self-aware in this moment in your body. You're not being conscious in your body in this moment. And I think that is the key, is actually experience it and face it. When you feel these limitations within yourself, these fears or insecurities or anxiety, just sit with it and be present. And I think maybe we'll have time later in the show to discuss how exactly to approach that.
Yeah.
But very, very important to actually face it and not to be pulled away, because your natural instinct in a way is to be pulled away from things that you don't want to experience. And we have to train ourselves mentally to be able to do the opposite, which is actually bring yourself into that experience and face it and watch what happens, and observe it.
Yeah, because whatever happens, it will be there for you to face and experience. And now, okay, now you realize, okay, you've got emotional blockages. Now you know the symptoms. Okay, I have discovered I am full of guilt, I'm full of fear, or I'm full of resentment. But carrying this blockage, how do you deal with it? Like, if I'm in fear, or if I'm in this guilt, it's on my chest all the time. Do I just throw it off to people? Because then what happens? I've got this on my chest now. Is I've brought it up to the sea level. Now it's in my consciousness. I'm just looking for triggers. If anybody says plays a certain song, right, and I'm just triggered, and I'll just look at him, and I'm finding opportunities to throw away of this emotional baggage of what I've come to the sea level. And it's really then I become very horrible. I begin to become very horrible to others. So what would you say, like, how could we really be human, be self-controlled, and actually keep all at the same time we are healing, we are letting go, but at the same time we are doing this process where we are actually dealing with our not so pleasant emotions? What would be your take on this?
That's a great question. I think it's something it doesn't have a simple answer to it, and there's so many situations that each situation would call for something unique for that person in that unique situation. But I think the key, the root to everything, because like I said, there's infinite amounts of situations and contexts, but the root is you, right? Because you're the one experiencing all of these things. So I think the key is to get in touch with your self-awareness, because once you're self-aware in each moment, you bring the unconscious to your conscious, which means the things that are going on subconsciously that you're not really aware of, which is the fears and the insecurities. As you become conscious of them, you start to see that they're silly in a way, but until you see them, it's like you have to see it. And in that moment, you feel like a child in a way, because actually it's from your childhood that you're experiencing that emotion. So you have to face that moment where you feel like a child for being afraid of this thing or for feeling anxiety. And you have to comfort yourself in that moment and say, look, I feel completely fine, you know? There's nobody attacking me. There's no real issue that I need to, there's no like threat, which is what our mind perceives it as. Our mind doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat, right? So these emotional blockages come from us perceiving a threat and thinking, oh no, I should protect myself from this threat. And whenever there is a threat, we'd rather avoid it. So it's like, it's kind of like a cycle that keeps going until you stop and you come in and say, okay, I'm going to face this threat, and let me just sit here and see what happens. And you sit there, and you know, whether it's like my example of, you know, years ago freestyling with my friends and I felt anxious, and then I said, okay, let me just sit and let me just try and freestyle and see what happens. What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And you know, we would freestyle, and like I would say some stupid things that didn't make sense. We would all laugh about it, you know.
Right.
And if you can be okay with laughing at yourself and not taking yourself so seriously that everything has to be perfect, you have to say the right thing, you can't say a stupid thing, or you know, when you can take yourself a little less seriously and just realize that it's not so serious. And another thing I really want to say is that something that really helped me grow within that context is people are not so worried about you. People are not paying so much attention to you.
This is true.
You know? And part of the insecurity and the fear of social anxiety and stuff, I feel like in a way you have to see how selfish it is, because you think everyone is paying attention to what you're doing, every little thing, but nobody cares about you, to be honest. It's like people are too worried about themselves and thinking the exact same thing. Oh, I wonder what he's thinking about me, and should I do this? Should I say this thing? So like you have to realize and kind of humble yourself and say, look, nobody really cares that much about every little thing you do, you know? And it's selfish to think that people do. And it's like a selfishness that's disguised as fear a lot of the times. But you have to realize, listen, people don't care about you so much. They care about themselves. And that's a very freeing realization, because then you realize I can do whatever I want. Like, you know, let yourself be free. As you consciously face that in each moment and you become more and more conscious and present, and you don't run away from it, you face it, then slowly you will, it's a slow thing, you know, you can't just snap your fingers and get rid of fear or anxiety, but slowly you'll.
And I live by this mindset where I'm actually living by the day. I practice this all the time. Well, what I do, it's whatever's today is today. Whatever was yesterday is left in past. And I think it's unnecessary holding from past traumas or past hurts into the present moment, because once you do that, you bring the past into present, and once you do, once your present is affected, is due to your past, it's gonna have a domino effect. It's gonna have a effect on your future, because your past is creating a future. Your present is creating a future. So I have this analogy of living by the day, and I think there's another take to this would be that forgive and forget. Now, forgiving is done. It can be done. Now, forgiving, if anybody hurts you, it's okay to forgive and move on. I personally had, and I think everybody has. They go through. They get let down by people, and or they get refused from their job applicants, and there's a lot of resentment involved in that. But I think I personally take this take on this: forgive, and then to forget, it's not easy to forget, but just keep in the back of your mind. But it's okay to just forgive and move on, and let new things come into your life and be part of it. Now, moving on from this, because we're talking so much on emotions, and we're getting really right into this. But I'm gonna throw a very rhetorical question at you. Is it okay to be emotionless? Now let's look at things from a different point of view. Now, okay, we talk so much on emotions and how emotions are so precious and how they can affect our activities in our daily life. But is it okay to be emotionless? You know, we have this reasoning over emotions. Some people are very much like that. So what would you say on that too?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely situations where you want to override your emotions, because your emotions want one thing, but you know with your reasoning that, you know, this is not a good thing to follow for the long term. So there's a lot of moments where we should override our what we're feeling in that moment for what's better in the long term, right? And we have the logic to be able to do that. And that's what kind of separates us from animals, actually, because our consciousness is advanced enough that we can have insight into the future and look at what's good for the long term and not just what's good for that specific moment and how we feel, right? But having said that, at the same time, our emotions are very important because a lot of times they reflect to us how we're feeling, and there's a reason why we're feeling a certain way. So I think it really depends on the situation, but I think it's important to be aware of your emotions so that they're not controlling you. And at the same time, I would kind of just to kind of counter or argue that question in a way. It's like a lot of the times we're too focused on reasoning and logic and trying to do everything correct and okay, I think I should do this and trying to map out every single moment of our life and analyze and plan. And I feel like sometimes in some situations the opposite needs to happen where we need to override our constant what would you call it, our constant planning and constant analyzing in our mind and just kind of feel it out and just move with your heart, and just move through each situation as it comes. So I think there's two sides to it, right? So
Hmm.
I think it really depends on the context
Hmm.
situation, but I think the most important thing is to be aware of all of it. Whether it's
Hmm.
the thinking and planning, or whether it's your emotions, be aware of all of them, and that self-awareness will always guide you.
Hmm. Now, it's been a very interesting discussion, a dialogue on this. We started off from how we build our, our emotions. It could be from could be from a young age. Then we move on to symptoms where we actually begin to realize we actually have a, self-awareness, right? So we are actually aware of our actions and our emotions as if we looking at a 3D perspective as a third person, or we just very simply aware of our inner state. Now, you said with, we also talked on how we deal with these emotions like resentment, guilt, and fear. We are very, we try to be very a sociable human being and still try to untangle one thing at a time rather than just, as you said, it cannot happen over a click of a finger. It's a process that takes time to resolve because it's a years of a blockage. It will take some time eventually, and then you will forget about it and move on. And now, now, just to end things up and to actually give a solution to our audience who's watching this, and what's one thing, Noman, you could and suggest we could take away, and we could start implementing today, and maybe to unblock this blockage, like you just pull the plug out, and all the drain, the water's draining down the server, and it's and we drop by drop eventually. What would you suggest we
Um,
could adapt into and bring into our life? One simple technique which
uh,
will help
I
to
think
unblock this.
the sort of the skeleton key or the well, I guess you would call it the skeleton key, something that opens every door, is self-awareness, right? And this is something that I'm focused on completely in my life now because it's something that transforms your life more than anything else, more than any book that you study, more than anything else that you study. When you study yourself and your emotions and your mind, that will teach you and transform you much more than anything else because what happens is anything you learn, it gets stored in your brain, and it becomes an intellectual storage that you're collecting from all these books and stuff. But anything that just stays in your mind is not transforming you, and therefore it just remains like an intellectual container, right? That you just keep adding more and more intellectual information into it. So the key is there's so many people, right, that you see that have PhDs and all these things, but you don't see them transformed as an individual because it's just intellectual information. So I think the more than anything else that I could possibly say to anyone, the thing that will help you the most is if you become self-aware. And the key to that, I think, would be to pay attention to your mind because there's a little exercise that I do. There was a company that I worked with where I would go to schools and run mindfulness programs. And if it's okay, I'd like to do a little quick exercise with you now. This is the exercise that I use to help people become aware of their mind. So let's take any random word. For example, home. Can you say the word home out loud? And the viewers can do this with us. So say the word home out loud.
Home run? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it doesn't matter about home.
Okay, home.
It doesn't matter.
Home.
So now this time we're going to do it again, but this time you're going to say the word out loud. Or sorry, you're going to say the word again without saying it out loud. Okay, so you're not allowed to make any sounds and you're not allowed to make any movement. So you can't, that's also a movement when you're mouthing the word. So say the word without making any noise and without making any movements. Okay, so if you kind of followed along, the viewers that are watching, then you should have said it in your head, in this voice, in this little voice in your head. And this little voice that we just spoke in without actually moving our mouth is the most important thing, in my opinion, that you can pay attention to, because we're always speaking in this voice. 99% of our life we're speaking in this voice, and we're not aware of what we're saying. You know? This voice is actually dictating your life every moment. Each moment it's dictating how you feel, it's dictating how you behave. And if that voice is subconscious, then everything that you're doing in your life every moment is going to be subconscious. You're not going to be fully conscious because you're not aware of this voice that's running everything. You know, it's commentating on everything you're doing. It's telling you, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, why did this person say this to me? And you know, you're constantly judging your environment because it's something that's evolutionary. We need to do that to be able to stay safe, right? Because we need to analyze and judge, is this person, you know, about to attack me, or, you know, what this person saying something that's making me feel threatened. But this little voice that's commentating on everything is going right past your conscious. So it's just there in the background and you're not able to be aware of what's happening with it. So I think once you do that, and every time you notice that your voice is speaking in your head and talking and commentating, you just bring it back to silence. And it's a little tricky to conceptualize because most people don't even listen to that voice. So you think, oh, I'm not speaking in that. I'm not thinking in my head right now. But you are. And it's almost a few seconds in a day that you're actually not thinking. So as you become more aware of this voice in your head, you realize the more aware you become, the more you realize that you're actually speaking in that voice and thinking at all times. So, and it comes to a point where as you become more aware of it, you're going to get annoyed by how much you're speaking in your head, and you're going to say, how do I shut it off? Which is what everyone comes to, the point everyone comes to when you start to pay attention to it. And how you shut it off is by simply ignoring these thoughts. Just ignore them. You have the power to just, because a thought pops up like, hey, remember what this person said to me? And why did you say that? And then we go deep into it, and 20 minutes later we snap out and we go, wow, I just spent the past 20 minutes thinking about this.
Yeah, absolutely happens. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So I think that's the key. If you can, every time that you notice yourself thinking about something, you just snap out of it and you just come back to silence. And every time you do that, you have more control that you're gaining over your mind. And you come back to just being conscious in this moment. And when you're conscious, you can deal with each situation that comes up in the best way. Whereas if you're not conscious and you're thinking in your head, you're not truly listening to the person. You're not truly reacting to your environment. You're reacting to the past, which is showing up in your mind from your past trauma, things like that. So I think that would be the biggest takeaway.
That is beautifully said. You know, like the way you've explained this, how you've actually given us a little example by saying home out loud, and then saying the word home. And we actually, I heard my mind talk, and it was saying home, and then when I listened to it more and more, it was the next things I was listening to hear. Okay, what I'm going to say next, and it was all the different. Oh, did I have breakfast? And my breakfast wasn't so pleasant, and I got traveling, and my traveling was great, and I'm meeting new people, and all these little. And my mind is talking, chattering, on and on and on. And as you said, it gets annoying, and you begin to realize, like, wow, this conversation is being played out 24/7, but I'm just not aware. So it's just beautifully how you said, just raise your awareness, where you can actually observe and see. Just simply see. Don't act. Just simply observe and
one more thing. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add to what you just said because you're saying you're speaking in your head, but you don't realize it. And what happens is, most of the time, we're not having a conversation with the other person. We're having a conversation with our own mind.
Selves. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it happens a lot of time. And then you go, we're talking to somebody. What did you say? That, yeah. And then we pick a word where we left from. Oh, you mentioned, we could be talking something about cars, and we talked about the engine, and we now are talking about the wheels. And I left the conversation mentally at the engine, and now you're talking about the wheel. Oh, and I still remember, I go back there. The engine. Oh, yeah, yeah. They said, no, we're on the car right now. I mean, we're on the wheels. And this is that sort of thing happens all the time, where we just caught up and thinking the unnecessary, listen to unnecessary mind chatter. So this is amazing what we had from Noaman. He explained how we we build these emotion blockages and the symptoms behind it, and at the end it beautifully explained, and in the most elegant and the most simple way, it just simply listen and simply observe and see what is actually going on in your headspace. Because that's where great things and not so great things can happen. This is where the world is transformed, and this is also a place, a headspace where a world can be a very unpleasant place. Now,
Yes.
yeah. So, without any further ado, I would like to thank you, Noman, again, Mr. Soulflow, to join me today in this my first show, and I was very delighted and honored to have him today. And for everyone else who's watching this, we will be having some more series where Noman and I'll be having dialogue on different various topics. So if you do have any suggestions where you would like me and Mr. Soulflow to discuss on, then please do drop it into the comment box and share and like and support us, guys, and give us and all the respect and the liking you can do. And in the end, thank you, Mr. Soul, Noman. It was a pleasure having you. And we'll be seeing more of you on Alra TV in my show. Thank you, Mr. Soul. Thank you, Noman.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the future shows as well. Thank you.